The Saturday Brunch Film Review.
Okay. So we got The Hunger Games, Mockingjay Part 1. It's directed by Francis Lawrence and stars Jennifer Lawrence, Josh Hutcherson. That's not a real name.
It is.
And Liam Hemsworth. Let's take a listen to a clip from the film.
Let's everybody think of one incident where Katniss Everdeen genuinely moved you.
When she volunteered for her sister at the reaping.
Excellent example. Okay. Now, I hope that wasn't important. Okay, volunteer forces. Good. What else?
Oh, when she sang that song for Little Rue.
Oh, yeah. Who didn't get choked up at that? You know, I like you better, Effie, without all that makeup.
Oh, I like you better sober.
When Katniss destroys the game, she goes to District 13 after District 12 is destroyed. She meets President Coin, who convinces her to be the symbol of rebellion while trying to save Peter from the capital. What do we think, chaps?
I really enjoyed it. I was a bit worried because they split Mockingjay into two parts, like they're doing with every sci-fi fantasy book adaptation these days.
Started with Potter, then Twilight did it, and then Hobbit did it, and now Hunger Games. And Avengers are doing it now as well.
Oh, yeah. So it's a bit of a worrying trend, so I went in there with a little bit of trepidation, but I really enjoyed it. I was expecting it to drag with just filler, because they wanted to save all the final battle stuff for Mockingjay Part 2, but yeah, I thought it went at a good pace as well, and some great performances too.
I've got to ask quickly, because this is something that always bugs me about these kind of films. Is it not always the case, though, that the film that leads to the conclusion is always good? Two Towers is the perfect example for me. I always feel like Two Towers is the best Lord of the Rings film, and then Return of the King doesn't deliver. Did you guys get a feeling that this is the way that this is going to go?
However, I would argue that because there are 3 books, that this is actually the first part of the final film.
Okay, use the Hobbit then. Use the Hobbit as an example, because again, I think the second one feels like, because I loved the second Hobbit movie, but I get the feeling that the third won't deliver as well. Now, do you feel like that this is going to be the same thing with Hunger Games?
I think the splitting off of the final book is all about finding a natural conclusion within a larger text and making sure that you end on a full stop rather than and then a sudden cliff drop. And that was my one problem with Mockingjay Part 1. I felt that it finished a plot twist or like a twist to the knife too soon. Like, there should have been, like, an additional, say, 10 minutes, or there should have been a bit more of a lead-up, because I think it does just end. So, if you imagine, like, the end of a film or a cliffhanger, like, feeling, well, sure, you want to see more, but there is still, a full stop there. This just kind of, it's like a sudden drop, and then it goes. And that was my one problem with it. It's all very interesting, but I think if they were still doing the final book as one film, I think all of this you could have put into the first half hour of a 2-hour film, and it still would have been interesting, it still would have been great, but it just feels like there should be maybe like another 10 minutes or so right at the end.
Yeah,
okay.
I know that when Francis Lawrence took over directing for Catching Fire, he didn't do the first Hunger Games, and one of the biggest qualms that people had for the first film is that there wasn't enough of the world building that the books had. You didn't get a feeling for what the districts did. You didn't get a feeling for the history of Panem as a society. So what Mockingjay Part 1 is doing, and what Catching Fire did a little bit, is putting that back into what the first film didn't have. So this is all that build-up and all that world building, so you care about everybody else other than Katniss and Peter and Gale and all the people that it's focused on. I don't think we're going to see that in Part 2. It'll just probably be carnage and tears.
My problem with the first Hunger Games film, I said this to you, Dom, that I felt that it wasn't adult enough to be an adult film, and it wasn't childish enough to be a children's film. How does that feel now? You know, we always get this term now, oh, it's going darker. Does it feel like it's going that way?
I think the first one does, despite the fact it's a 12-8, does a very good job getting the visceral nature of the games across. Like, you don't see much injury or blood, but it still feels horrific. This one, I think, feels a lot more adult or darker or different, because they're no longer in the games anymore. You haven't got that set formula of they get enlisted, they meet all the other contestants, they get their weapons, they go into the games, some of them come out. They've instead moved it outside of that arena. So now that was one of my problems with the second one. It was essentially a retread of the first one. Even if the themes were slightly different, the narrative was essentially exactly the same. This is different, and I would definitely say darker or at least more adult, because it's a very claustrophobic film. It mostly takes place in the tunnels underneath District 13, and the themes it's dealing with, it deals with them a lot more in depth than I would expect from a movie, well, essentially a 12A popcorn blockbuster movie. A lot of it is about how the media uses symbols and uses people to put messages across. And it's also, I think, a lot more adult because it doesn't pull its punches when it comes to showing the horrors and the results of war either. There are loads of scenes where they show the aftermath of a conflict, and it's horrific. Absolutely horrific, and not something I would expect from a 12A film at all. So it's quite brave in that regard.
What about the performances then? Jennifer pulling out the bag again, hopefully, because I'm a big fan.
Yes, what she does. I mean, have you read the books, Jamie?
I haven't. I've deliberately saved myself just to watch this film, so that I'm going to be shocked and surprised whenever all the reveals come in. So I've stayed away from the books for now.
What did you think about Jennifer Lawrence? Because I thought, again, it was just another great performance from her.
Yeah, it seems that she can't do no wrong. Any performance that she gives just sort of knocks it out of the park. Yeah, I think she's taken this character, and it's kind of been the one that's thrown into the limelight and made her as big as she is, I'd say. But yeah, she's done so good with it, and yeah, I don't think there's any part of the film that I'd say that she didn't perform other than top notch.
From what I've heard, apparently in the source material, her character spends a lot of this book just kind of weeping and essentially crying her eyes out, but you don't get that a lot. You get a bit of it from her in this, but she definitely kind of transcends, if that's true about the source material, transcends that by becoming. I think she's no longer the main. It's not all about her anymore, but she's kind of the focal point of this plotline, and she does a good job of driving it forwards. I think the one character that is definitely a lot better than the other films is the character of Peter, which I believe was played by Josh Hutcherson. In the previous films, he's kind of the awkward third wheel in this love triangle, which is still present in this film, but here he's essentially got he's the dual role of that Katniss has got. So whereas the air quotes good guys, and I hesitantly use that term because I don't think anyone who's in power or an authority in this film is actually that good, are using Katniss to kind of put their own agenda across. The Capitol, the bad guys, are doing the same with Peter, and he's been manipulated, and it finally gives his character something to do, because I felt in the previous films he was a bit of a wet blanket and a bit useless. Whereas in this, he's kind of a tortured soul, basically being used as a puppet by the Capitol. The main bad guy in this, of course, in all the other films, President Snow, being played by Kiefer Sutherland. Such a good moustache-twirling bad guy.
Pardon? Say that again? Who was in it? Kiefer Sutherland?
Not the guy from 24.
Oh, God.
No.
Donald.
I was going to say Kiefer Sutherland.
Donald Sutherland.
Yeah, his dad.
I got mixed up. Oh, his dad. No, of course.
Yeah, you give me a heart attack.
No.
No. Kiefer Sutherland's in games? Wow.
No, Donald Sutherland then. Brilliant.
Yeah, superb actor.
There's a moment where he's talking to Katniss over a screen, which is where a lot of the film takes place, with Katniss looking at a screen and then someone talking to her via the screen. But and he's kind of delivering the Machiavellian Eels speech, and there's a little bit of an evil twinkle in his eye, and it's so enjoyable. He's a good bad guy to hate.
So we're lots of anticipation then for the next release. Is that next Christmas or?
Maybe
we'll get a producer on that. We'll find out what that is.
Probably November. It wouldn't dare go up against Star Wars. It will get sliced in twain.
Indeed.
So overall, I quite enjoy it. It's the most political of the series. Although I still think it feels like it's building up towards something. That was the problem that Catching Fire in my eyes had. It was a bit of a retread just to kind of fill Katniss's character arc for 2 hours. They get her from the point she is at the end of the Hunger Games to the start of this one. And because it is the lead up to a larger event, it did feel like, again, the characters were kind of standing still. But I was never bored whilst I was in there. It's all of the toing and throwing between the different characters. It was all quite interesting. And I felt, at least in how it puts itself together, it was quite different for kind of a tentpole blockbuster.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was really good is that it did a similar thing to the Harry Potter franchise, in that the first Hunger Games movie, obviously based on a young adult novel, felt very young adult in its in the way that it was executed. But Mockingjay Part 1 seems to have grown up with the audience and grown up with the characters, and that's where that sort of darker, more adult sort of theme kicks in, because at the start, sort of Katniss is suffering from like post-traumatic stress disorder from being in the games twice in as many years. And yeah, it's that kind of level that you couldn't really put into a young adult sort of series or film, but now that the audience has grown up a little bit, you can do that, and you can put a bit more character development into it, and I think that is what sort of makes it one of the I hesitate to say it's one of my favourites of the three so far, just because it's got that more mature theme to it.
So, here on the Saturday Brunch Film Review, when it comes to the movies, we have 3 ratings. We've got, I believe, a good film gets a play.
Yep.
A so-so in the middle gets a pause.
Yep.
And if we don't like it at all, big, dirty stop.
Although we do have a fourth, technically, a rewind, which is we'll give it another look, because we're not entirely sure. Which I think we did kind of sort of feel about
Interstellar.
Yeah, that we do need to give it another look. Although I did actually find somebody this week who thought it was as good as me, so up yours, Dom.
Mike goes down. So for me, Mockingjay Part 1, for all of its faults, I think gets a play. What about you, Jamie?
Gets a play from me as well, but make sure you watch the first 2 movies before going to see this.
Oh, yeah,
I would
Don't be silly.
there's no mileage in this at all if you haven't seen them, I'm guessing.
The Saturday Brunch Film Review.